afternoon, I should say, on navigating the challenges of delivering omnichannel CX in rare diseases. So rare disease space, a little bit different, a nice account. Some of you already are familiar with Myles from the panel that we had earlier as well. And just for context, Myles' fun fact is he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is quite impressive. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Myles as our second to last speaker today.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Simon, for inviting me. Happy to be here. So I'm going to take you through the next 65 slides, just talking about sort of the importance of what... Oh, no? Okay, read the audience. So I've been working in this space for about 20 plus years, and so we've talked a little bit about already across the 2 days about customer experience and what that means and its importance. We talked about omnichannel and what that means, and we all have our different definitions. I'm going to talk to you today about really just the challenges in the unique space of rare diseases and what do we need to do to sort of be successful about getting information into the right hands to have informed decisions. But maybe let's just do some context setting. As you know, I kind of picked up, I enjoy talking about the context of things and the why behind them. So whether you have this sort of utopian view of all of the great technologies that are out there and the advances that we've had in marketing, and you sort of are aligned to the advantages of transparency and democratization of information, or you are kept up late at night worried about disinformation and misinformation, and how do you combat that in this industry as we continue to try to help our HCP and patient audiences, or if you're somewhere on the continuum in there, and I'll leave that to you guys to sort of identify where you are. But generally, when I get asked to talk about omnichannel, the first thing I always like to do is just start with some context around, well, for our industry that we are in, it does not necessarily mean all channels. It may, but that's a decision, a strategic decision that you need to take. Don't just go with a simple, let's throw everything out there because we can, because of the ease of technology. Step back and really think about where do you really need to be for your audience. So as we all know, as humans, so let's pause and remember we're humans, and HCPs and patients and caregivers are humans as well, and we are all inundated with in this always-on world. So information is coming at us all the time. And so we have to think about, do we want to be additive to that problem or reductive to that problem? So it's really important for you to think about focusing on what are the relevant challenges for your audience and providing them contextual information, not just data, but contextual information in the moments that matter. And not in the moments that matter to you as a marketer, but to them. Where are they in their experience? What are the problems they are trying to solve, and how can you help them? So if you look at our industry and the industry that we serve, the healthcare space, here's a staggering number that most of us probably already know, that by 2030, there's going to be a shortfall of 10 million health professionals around the world. If we just think back to the pandemic, and I know that feels like a long time ago already, but the stress that was on our healthcare systems to deal with those challenges, given our aging populations and the increases in diseases, this stress on the system is going to continue. If you think about specifically in the rare disease space, and we all kind of have a good sense of 200,000 or less is a rare disease, but then you start sort of extrapolating that, that's 2,000, but there's roughly 7,000 rare diseases within the US alone. That's roughly equates to about 25 to 30 million patients. So if you think about that 20 to 30 million patients who are typically underserved, they are going through long diagnosis cycles with constant rejection, constant trust erosion between discussions between themselves and their doctors, because a doctor, I was recently talking to an emergency room doctor who told me his typical day, 40 to 50 patients. 40 to 50 patients. So just think of the pressure that he's under, and then think about the needle in the haystack, this one patient that may show up because they have not been diagnosed appropriately, and they may show up in that situation. So how are we going to help the patient and the HCP? So one of the things that we need to do is we need to go where people are. So again, thinking about healthcare professionals as people too, we know that 80% of them use social media, and there was a great presentation on social media today, and how do you think about not just putting content on a social media platform, but what is the best content for that platform? What is the right platform to use for your audience? Similarly, when we think about patients, it's again, high 80s, 84% of patients are going seeking information for health-related questions. So if you marry those two together, if you know that the traditional model, will be provocative here, the traditional model of campaigns specifically targeted for HCPs, campaigns specifically targeted for patients, and hoping that somehow they connect, that model just doesn't make sense anymore. You have to understand that, yes, we have to work in compliance, but HCPs will be consuming your patient materials on other platforms, as will patients. Right? So you have to think about how do you sort of marry those campaigns together, and understanding what we've talked about on the nuances of, yes, HCPs are looking for more clinical, high science-related content, whereas patients, you should be at 7th or 5th grade level to make it easy and more empathetic for them. But these things are coinciding constantly, and this is just one example for social media. So as you think about omnichannel, you have to think about all of the relevant channels for you and where you need to go and how you show up there. So if I walked away now and you guys just said, got it, social media, all over it. We're going to leverage AI, content creation. We're going to blast stuff out there. We're going to be on every platform. We're going to be doing best practices. It's going to be awesome. Would you succeed or would you fail? Well, the answer is it depends. I would challenge you to, first of all, step back for a second and think about the best way to meet your audience needs is to think about a hamburger. Now, I'm not talking about Five Guys or McDonald's or whatever your preferred hamburger is, and I'm not talking about the hamburger icon that we all have come accustomed to seeing on as a menu icon for websites. No, I'm talking about thinking about at the top of the bun, what is your unified end-to-end experience that you're trying to create? End-to-end experience for both the HCP and the patient, and how do they come together? At the bottom of the bun, think about the systems and the architecture. Don't let the technology solution lead you to solving the problem. Define the problem and then think about how systems and architecture can help you. And the magic sauce or meat or protein in that hamburger is data. But again, not all data is created equal. And we'll talk a little bit about this. But if you walk away from nothing else from this session, this is a relatively simple framework to have provocative questions with your teams about how do we think about our campaigns, how do we think about moving the needle for our audiences. So I'll walk through each of these and give a couple of examples. So in a unified end-to-end experience, first thing we've talked about a little bit already and over the last 2 days, think about how do you align that HCP and that DTP or direct-to-caregiver audience needs. What does that mean? Well, the trick, particularly in rare, is you have to balance between driving this patient urgency with growing your engagement with your HCPs. Because what you want to avoid is creating an adversarial relationship. So think back to a couple of slides ago when we talked about the pressures that are already on HCPs in terms of information overload. 40 plus patients are seeing a day. The advantages of technology is when they do tests, if you think about electronic medical records, more times than not, patients are actually getting the results of their tests before the healthcare provider can actually look at them and digest them, and they're getting a call from the patient going, hey, I saw my results, worst case scenario, and then the doctor is on the back foot trying to say, wait, I need to digest this, I need to figure out and contextualize it. So if you're driving an urgency to create testing, as an example, make sure that you're complementing that with how are you supporting that HCP in that situation. So if you're doing a point of care and you have patient materials that talk about screening, whatever that screening test may be, and you get that urgency for them to go to have that conversation with the doctor, try to avoid creating a scenario where the patient is showing up the first time at the materials and the doctor knows nothing about the context of the disease, particularly if you're launching in a rare space. That is not the sort of relationship that you want to create, because your job, our job, is to help facilitate appropriately and compliantly an informed decision between a patient and a HCP about what's right for that patient. From a data perspective, I've said this a couple of times and I'll say it again, not all data is created equal. And as an industry, we have a tendency to generalize. And so we all have a different idea of omnichannel. We all have a different idea of AI. We all have a different idea of data. So really, when you start thinking about data, step back and think about, first of all, relationships between data. So let's start at the basic level, raw data. Not contextualized, right? It's great. You get all this information in, but I would always ask you to say, pause before you think about the beauty of, particularly if you're doing digital marketing and analytics, you can pull all of this information in, but just because you can get access to the data, and we talked about this yesterday in the cookie, pre-cookie world, first level, second level, et cetera. Just because you can get data doesn't mean you should take the data. If you're not going to make any decisions with that data, it's a waste. You're exposing yourself to risk. As I mentioned earlier, there's 20 states right now within the US that have strong data privacy laws. So you're exposing your company to risk. You're exposing yourself to the unrealized cost of total cost of ownership, right? So pulling data in is one thing, getting into your data lake or your data warehouse or your MDMs or whatever you want to articulate it to be. But now you have to manage that data. You have to make sure it's clean. You have to make sure at any point in time, if somebody says, show me the information you have on me, that you're easily able to show that to them, and if they want you to delete it, that you can. So think about data and this foundational raw data as, what is the raw data I really need to help move me up the maturity level? Because as I move from data, what I want to do is I want to add context to it. And if I can add context to it, now I have information. So now I'm thinking about sort of what, where, when people are consuming my information. So I'm starting to now get some understandings. And then on top of that information, now I want to add meaning to it. And if I add meaning to it, now I can answer the fundamental question that I should always be trying to answer, is the why. So now we have knowledge. Now applying that knowledge gets us some wisdom. And this is where we need to go. And we talked a bit about today around AI and its opportunities. And this is where you can start thinking about how AI may be able to help you in some of these places. So we think about like next best actions. Well, to get the next best actions, you need to be thinking about this structure, not just raw data. And then we think about the sort of systems and the architecture. Again, do not let the tail wag the dog in this scenario. Do not have this shiny technology solution that you become enamored with, and then you run off and try to find a problem to leverage the solution with. Understand the problem first. So always think about how do you enable the front-end experience with the back-end integration needs. So move beyond sort of generalizations about, we talk about seamless customer experiences. Well, what does seamless customer experiences need? I mean, if I'm going to get a really nice tailored suit, it's going to have seams. Because if it doesn't have seams, it doesn't fit me. It's not personalized. So is seamless about removing the friction points between, if I'm talking to care support on a call, and I've already interacted with a whole bunch of materials, and I've received emails and so on, and I have to keep repeating the conversation, that's not seamless. But do I need to solve that? What I actually need to solve is the friction between Why am I assuming that you're coming into each of these touch points for the very first time and you're going to follow a journey that I've predefined for you? And particularly in rare disease, when we think about patients who can go 5 to 10 years being misdiagnosed, so their journey is constantly iterating over and over and over again. And if we've created this beautiful journey workflow and we think we go to A to B to C to D, that's not the reality for them. So think about what do you need to have in place to make that experience for them on the front end easier, less friction, and then what are the systems that you need to put in place behind that to make that happen? So how do you transfer the information from one system if you're doing your emails, to another system if you have your websites, to another system where you have people in CRM programs, to another system where you're creating all of your insights for your media plans? How do you actually lift up the hood and look under that and create that integration point so that that experience can be created? So understanding the bottom of the bun, the top of the bun, and the data in between those is absolutely critical. So I went through that quickly, but as Kevin said earlier, as a marketer, always good to end with a quote from someone that's a little bit smarter than you. Okay, maybe a lot smarter than me. But this is the challenge I would put to all of us in the room and listening to this presentation. We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that got us here, that created these problems. So we have to think differently. This is your challenge. How do I think differently? How do I move out of my sort of legacy of thinking of things to be open to innovation? And again, innovation is not only about additive, but it's about reductive. How do I simplify things for my audience? How do I help them make informed decisions? How do I support them in their journey? Because that is not only the right thing to do for your audiences, that is also a sound business approach to take. So with that, I'm going to end. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Myles. Let's give him a round of applause. All right, wonderful talk. Does anybody want to, comment, questions? Obviously, I know this is rare disease. Yes, Ian.
So thank you very much for this, very helpful. Curious about the data aspect that you touched on, the raw data especially. Do you have any advice, tips, tricks from a taxonomy perspective to help ensure that data is clean, even if it's raw? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a significant challenge. I think the first step, before you even think about taxonomy, mm-hmm. ask yourself this question. Why are you even interested in that data in the first place? Mm-hmm. What decision are you going to make on that data? Mm-hmm. And then you have to think about, okay, well, if this is the problem I'm going to use that data to solve, what is the kind of critical success factors to help me answer that question? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we focus a lot on, I focus a lot on my career, is going beyond basic things like, hey, I'm pulling in impressions, I'm pulling in clicks, I'm pulling in engagement numbers. That's great, top of funnel, but I need to move down. What are the beyond KPIs? What are the high-valued actions that I'm looking to do? Mm-hmm. How does that apply to this problem I'm trying to solve? And if you can answer that, then you figure out, how do I go about then structuring the data? And the guiding principle that I always recommend is less is more. Mm-hmm. So just because you can get access to the data and you can pull it in, even if it's 0 level, first level, third level, whatever, be very judicious about the amount of data you want to pull in. Because if you're not going to make a decision on it, don't take it. Because it just makes things so much more difficult for you to manage.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Here, I'll go this way.
This is good.
Getting the steps.
Next question should be back over here.
Yeah. I'm always at the wrong side.
So I can't remember if you articulated how your current structure is, but one of the challenges that I've observed is a lot of great work happening within the data teams and the tech teams and the platforms, et cetera, but there's no one person or role that has sort of oversight and ownership of the ecosystem, because what ends up happening, obviously, is those silos develop friction, and the data team doesn't know what the tech team's doing, and vice versa. So I'm just curious what you've experienced there, and if you have, if you personally have some oversight over that to try to do some of that orchestration.
Yeah, it's an ongoing struggle. So I've worked at large pharma companies. I've worked at startups, and the company that I currently work at, about less than 500. So we're somewhere in between. But the first thing is sort of change management 101 is, first of all, you have to figure out all of it, and it was in a couple of presentations today. You have to think about the culture, you have to think about the politics, you have to think about the silos, all these things. But the first principle is, can you clearly articulate a problem in your organization? So you kind of think about models like, let's create dissatisfaction. Let's clearly articulate what is the dissatisfaction today. Because if I cannot articulate the dissatisfaction today, it doesn't matter how beautiful the vision is of the future where I want to go, there's inertia. I'm not going to move. Because naturally, as humans, right, we kind of reluctant to change. So that's step one. Clearly articulate the dissatisfaction. Step two, clearly articulate that desire to be state that you want to go to, that vision, and then lay out the process to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And a key part of that is understanding the culture of your organization and who are the people you need to be involved in the conversations. And I would say the number one critical success factor, so this is a topic I'm very passionate about, but I have to make sure that I don't let my ego get involved in, oh, I need to own it. Mm-hmm. I need to own what I need to own to make a decision. But who owns that? How close are they to the raw data, the information, whatever that looks like? Right. Make sure you have proximity to appropriate ownership. That's sort of the secret sauce, if you will. So if you can articulate, okay, here's the problems we have today. Here's the WIFM, why we want to go here. And that's very different, as you know. As a marketer, this WIFM for me is very different than the WIFM for the ops team or for the analytics and insights team. So I need to understand their dissatisfaction today and what would be exciting for them for tomorrow and help them get there. And then how does that, if you think about this as a sort of overarching pathway, and I've got these nodal connections, right? And these sort of like Ishikawa's 7 Whys type scenarios, right? So I'm looking at, here's a WIFM for me, here's a WIFM for you. How do these connect? How can I help you, help me, help you type scenarios? Yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, totally. And I think as I was asking the question, I don't think a single ownership, is realistic with the way organizations are structured, but I think it's more of a process, getting the right process across those functions and that change management to get into a rhythm of how we get from A to B, like you described.
Yeah.
So
and governance is so important.
Yeah.
So it's more about governance and ownership. And governance is sort of this collective ownership, this shared skin in the game. Because if you sort of figure out, like, hey, this is where we want to go together to win, this is how we're going to get there. So one of the key things, and I'll give you a really simple example, but you can extrapolate it. If you work at large companies or even small companies and you start getting into multiple disease states, multiple indications, multiple products, a portfolio of things, then you extrapolate that out into large organizations. You get into these basic paid search scenarios where you're cannibalizing and bidding against yourself, right? You're like, oh my God, my performance is tanked. Why is my performance tanked? Throw more money at it. Solved. Excellent. Oh my God, my performance, right? So you could say, well, I'm going to own paid search for my brand and my suite of products, and you're going to own it for yours. But we're still going to end up at some point in time hitting a friction point and competing against ourselves. So better to say, let's create this is sort of like maybe a Pollyanna statement, but let's create an ego-friendly governance structure that enables us all to come together and say, what are your pain points? What are you trying to solve for? Hey, they're kind of similar to mine. Let's figure out, I won't bid on the same words that you're bidding on, or actually, I need those exact words, but I need it for this time frame. And if I can have it for this time frame, I'll give it back to you for your next point. So really kind of think about that. Get out of the silos that we have and the sort of tendencies about, I need to create my centers of excellence, which have benefit, but they can put you down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm stealing ego-friendly. That's good.
Okay.
All right. Any more quick questions for Myles before we crack on with our final one? Nope. All right. Thank you very much, Myles. Wonderful talk.
Thank you.